I'm Andy Smith. I'm the Chair of the Coney County Conservation Bank Board, calling this April 4th, 2023 meeting to order. We have a quorum. We have present Mr. Scotty Walker, the Vice Chair, Ms. Emmeline Jones, at-large member, Taylor Howard from District 4, myself, and Gordon Becker from District 1. Not present are Scott McCurry and Ryan Keese. First item on there, after the call to order, is election of officers, treasurer. I guess I'm still the treasurer because I didn't resign from that position when I was elected as chair, but I do that now. And so we need a motion for someone to be a treasurer. And I guess, could I ask first, is anybody interested in being treasurer?
I am not.
Particularly. I'm not either, if no one else can do it.
It's a fairly simple job, which is basically doing our treasurer's report at every meeting.
Okay.
And there, Jennifer gives that handout to us, and, it's just a matter of keeping up with our, reporting on our money, There's not really anything else to do with it.
Okay.
All right.
Well, sure, I'd love to help out. Be treasurer.
Okay, all right. So, I'll go ahead and move that we elect Taylor Howard as treasurer. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, very good. Thank you. And so your first job's going to be doing the treasurer's report.
Right.
And so we have two accounts.
Okay.
Okay, all right. And one's the Community First Bank account, and the other is the Local Government Investment Pool. And so let me just talk about those just a little bit. So the Local Government Investment Pool is a account where the majority of our money is, and we earn interest on that through a state pool. We have the Community First account, which is kind of our active account that we write checks out of. And really the only time we write checks is when we are giving a grant. Okay, and so that's all you have to do. And what you'll do, Taylor, each report that Jennifer's prepared has got a backup, which is the statement. We're not going to report off that, so all you really have to do is read off the treasurer's reports that Jennifer has drafted for you.
Okay, this is the Community First.
And I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. We need to do the minutes first.
Okay.
All right. So you can have a little time to look at that.
Sure.
So, and thank you for being willing to do that, Taylor. So next on that is the approval of the minutes from February 7th, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second. Any discussion?
So I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Three of us were not on the board.
That's right.
On February 7th. Can we approve the minutes of a meeting we didn't attend that occurred before we were on the board? And it's just a question.
That's a good question. I think that you can, and
Otherwise, I don't think we have a quorum to
That's
do
what,
it.
that's what I was thinking too. Like, I don't really think I can vote on this.
well, I don't think anybody will make you vote on this. But I guess the point could be too, Scotty and I were probably there, and if we had any issues with the minutes, we could bring up any issues there. And since we don't, you would be kind of riding our coattails
Sounds like a plan.
in approving.
And again, it's just
It's a great question. I've often wondered that myself, yeah.
I mean, we have changeover every couple of years with boards, and new people come on and old people go off, and
Right.
those next minutes, I never had someone question, should I be voting on these minutes? Because you are able to view it on YouTube.
It's a good
So you
point.
can, watch the meeting and compare it to the minutes if you needed to.
Okay. So did we have a motion?
Yes, you had a motion and a second.
Okay, all right, that's our discussion. All in favor on approving the February 7th minutes? Aye,
assuming you can.
okay. March 14th, 2023 minutes. We have a motion to approve those.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
The, Jennifer, my name is spelled wrong. It's not a huge deal, but on the minutes, I'm missing an E. It's Emelyn.
Get that corrected before I post it.
Pardon me?
I'll get that corrected
Oh, okay.
before I post it.
So did we have a second?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next is treasurer's report. Taylor.
All right, so for the Community First Bank account, we had an opening balance of $4,541. No deposits, no expenditures. The balance is the same amount.
And for what dates is that?
And that's for the period ending January 31st of 2023.
And there's probably gonna be another one in that, so.
And for the period ending February 28th, 2023, we had the opening balance of $4,541. Zero deposits, zero expenditures. The balance in that account is the same, $4,541. So do we need a motion to approve this?
Yeah, let's do that for both of those, and that's the Community First account, yes, sir.
So does anyone want to make a motion to approve these?
I'll make the motion to approve them.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
All in favor? Aye.
And so I'll go ahead and sign these.
Well, yeah, go ahead and do the local government, and then you can sign them and give them to Jennifer, you know, at the close of
Okay.
the meeting.
The second account is the local government investment pool for the period ending December 31st, 2022. We had an opening balance of $283,000, $166.53. There was a reinvestment of $1,038.87. No expenditures. The balance in the account is $284,205.40.
And what period is that?
That's for period ending December 31st, 2022.
Okay, and I'm gonna interject there because, when I looked at that, it says month to date and year to date, and they weren't the same. So I questioned that, and so I talked to the person we work with in the treasurer's office, and the year to date, it's not January 1st, it's the July, to end of June cycle.
Okay.
So that's why that was different.
Gotcha. And then the second report for the period ending January 31st, 2023, we had the opening balance of $284,000, $205.40, excuse me. We had a reinvestment deposit of $1,103.57. No expenditures. The balance in the account for the period ending January 31st, 2023 was $285,308.97.
Okay, and is that the last one, or is there one more?
Oh, there's one more, excuse me. For the period ending February 28th, 2023, we had an opening balance of $285,308.97. There was a $1,040.21 deposit through a reinvestment, which was interest. The balance as of February 28th, 2023 was $286,349.18.
Very good. Do we have a motion to approve the treasurer's report on the local government investment pool?
I'll move to approve it.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? No discussion? All in? Yeah, go
So
ahead.
I
Yes,
just
sir.
had a question,
No, no.
and that is, how, if anybody knows, how do we determine how much money goes into each one of those two accounts?
So,
I mean, how is it split?
okay, so we just keep a minimal amount of money in the Community First account. And I think they have a basic minimum of 1,500, and we've just left that money that's in there. But at one point, all the money was in there, and we moved most of it to the local government investment pool.
You can get better interest, apparently.
You don't,
By
we're
the
not getting
by the
any.
report, I mean,
We don't get any interest on the Community
Right.
First. So we put as much, essentially as much as we can in the local government investment pool.
so has it grown over time from 1,500 to 4,500 or?
That's the Community First account.
Yes.
Well, I think the reason that it's not 1,500 is because it had more money in there at one time, and I'm not sure exactly why we didn't move all of it out of there, and it's an odd amount in there, you know.
So do we have just, what, incidental expenses that come out of there? I'm just.
We
trying to
really
understand.
don't. We really don't, no.
Then why wouldn't we take that down closer to, say, $2,000
Yeah.
instead of 4,500?
I think
Now,
it's-
now we're getting.
That's where our donations go.
I got you, okay.
So the donations pretty much stay in the Community First account. So that's how it's probably built up.
There you go. That's a good reason.
Okay.
But again, your question remains the same, yeah.
So, would it be a better management policy to maintain that at a lower level, since we don't get any interest there, and put more money into the intergovernment?
It makes sense to me. I think it's a good idea.
Anyway, just discussion.
Any thoughts on that?
I like that idea. If we're not using the Community First account for really anything,
Right.
why does it matter if we have 4,500 versus 1,500 sitting in that
Right.
account?
Right.
So when we do a grant, does the grant come out of the larger?
Yeah, we transfer money from the local government investment pool to the Community First, where we have check writing authority, and then we write the check from the
Oh,
Community
okay,
First account.
yeah.
Yep. So, okay, good discussion. So, I think we would go to, maybe another motion after we approve his report on doing
And
that.
we don't have to do it at this meeting, we can think about it and come back at another meeting. I just wanted to clarify in my own mind how this is working.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, the thing that we might want to do is find out exactly what our minimum is. I think it's 1,500, but I think it'd be better to double check.
Sure.
With Community First, and probably have some little safe haven above that.
Right.
That's a great idea. Might as well make as much money as we can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Any more discussion? All in favor of approving the treasurer's report? Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thanks, Gordon. Next, we've got the fundraising public relations report. That would be Ryan. Ryan's not here. I haven't had any communication from Ryan on any of that. Does anybody have any thoughts or any knowledge about anything related to fundraising or thoughts?
Well, and I'm still trying to discern kind of the boundaries of what we can and can't do as board members, but, are we able to be more proactive with local land trusts and getting involved in some of the projects on the front end? Or do we just kind of sit back and wait for those things to come to us?
That's a great question. And that's something that we've talked about, talking to David Root about, and I haven't talked to David about that. I think it's a good idea. I mean, the basic question is if you see property out there, trying to inform the land trust about it and get them involved, that sort of thing. So why don't we put that, I'll follow through and give David a call about that. See
Yeah.
what we can get.
That sounds great.
So the list of the donation list, this was all done through fundraising and just word of mouth, or?
More word of mouth.
Okay.
We haven't really done
Okay.
any formal fundraising. And a lot of those, it has been through word of mouth, and a lot of those have been through board members. Particularly when board members go off, they often will give a donation.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
It's nice to see neighborhoods, several neighborhoods on here that donated.
And the Mountain Lakes Community Association has made a couple of donations, and they've made their donations. Shay Airy, who was one of the original members of the board, he had a law firm. I worked at that law firm. He would give a presentation to the Mountain Lakes Community Association, and then I took over giving those presentations, and they would make they would ask us, can we pay you for doing this? And we'd say no, but make a donation too.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's how that happened. And I think, let's see, seems like there was another, maybe upstate historical seekers. I think Laura Havern made a presentation to them, and they made a donation in result of that. But Richard Kane was a board member. Let's see. Laura Havern was, Francis Rundlett. Those were donations by board members.
Current or past?
Past,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm interested to understand like what the role is, like, is that something we're wanting to do more of? Really get out there and raise money and?
We would love that, and we've discussed it many times, and prior boards have looked at options with the county. We've met with Upstate Forever about doing fundraising, but we've never really gotten anything off the ground in terms of making presentations or doing a fundraising event or writing grants or anything like that. But it's definitely something that I think we need to do. And it's a challenging kind of thing, like raise money for nonprofits. It's, it takes a lot of energy and focus to do that. Kind of.
But it's just such a hot, as y'all know, hot topic, and it just goes across the board.
Right.
People are really now realizing how important it is. And however you fall on the political whatever, it's just a.
Yeah.
Especially with so many people moving here that are wanting to preserve hopefully what we have.
Yeah. One of our principles that's in our ordinance is that no tax dollars are spent towards what we do. And that's one of the big selling points.
Okay.
So we have to work within that context of, being creative outside of that scope.
Yes. So, and obviously Duke Power has given a good bit of money. Is that are we like considered a stakeholder with the renegotiation of Bad Creek? I've heard some, talk about.
Not really a stakeholder, but, my understanding, and that happened before I was on the board, that $618,000 that came from Duke, I think in 2016, came out of that relicensing and may have come out of litigation that they were, gonna dedicate some money to conservation. And I think Shay made the ask to them on that. That's where that came from. And that's really what we've been living off of.
Right, I just think with the new, they're up for relicensing and trying to get that expansion and all that.
And so subsequent to that, I contacted Duke to see just to, introduce the idea of the possibility of another donation. And, it didn't get I didn't get any positive response from that.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it's, not worth trying again. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it could be a precedent that they
Yeah.
support us.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or ideas or, one thing you may want to do is talk to Ryan, since he's been, that's sort of one of his focuses, and just see if y'all can come up with any ideas or, ways forward.
There's a number of fundraising events coming up this summer. I know the Chattooga Conservancy has one in July. I wonder if we couldn't do something like set up a table with a jar, at an event like that.
That's not a bad idea.
Well, or at a Friends of Lake Kiwi meeting too, same kind of thing, or even at the Oconee Bell. I know you're competing with all these other conservancy groups, but why not get out there too?
Right.
Maybe we could come up with a list of the potential things that we could do that.
Yes.
It's worth a try.
For sure.
It's a good idea.
Because the South Carolina Conservation Bank is funded with tax dollars,
That
correct?
is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It's legislative appropriation.
And so is the Greenville County Historical
That's right.
Conservation Bank.
That's right.
So what other counties in South Carolina have conservation?
That's a good
banks?
question, and I don't have the answer to that. I actually talked to folks at Upstate Forever about that. If they had a list of the local government conservation
Yeah.
banks, and they didn't have one.
There's a,
Even though they run the, what is it, South Carolina Land Trust Initiative or something, that I think Scott Park
right.
runs. And I talked to Chris about it, and they thought it was a good idea to have one, and it seems like it, it'd be an obvious thing to
Well, I
have.
think they're trying to get one in Spartanburg. I don't think Pickens has one.
No.
But I think it's interesting that we're a county organization without any county funds, tax dollars.
That's one of our big selling points.
That people like that it's private and,
Well, that it's not funded by taxpayer
Yeah.
dollars. And I think the concept was, well, we might not create, this thing might not be created if it was gonna be,
right.
have a tax.
Right. Well, and the same thing happened in Greenville County. First, they created the board,
Right,
and then they decided they would fund it, but it was a separate
right,
decision.
right. So, that's always something that could, ordinances can be changed,
Yeah,
you know?
interesting.
All right, next on the agenda is grant status. And can you flip to that on the, Jennifer, on the screen? It's kind of, yeah, right there. So this is our sheet that shows all the grants that we've given, when we gave them, how much it was for, and, what it was for, whether it was, and ultimately whether it was fee simple, conservation easement, et cetera. And let's see, where is it? Yeah, we still see that Whetstone Creek Preserve, the 66,000. And so I guess that's one of the things that came out of the report that Taylor gave, is that we hadn't gotten that check yet from them returning that grant. But that's our status, showing that we have conserved 1,100 acres since our first one in 2017. We've spent $356,000. And then there are a few incidental expenses, mainly wire fees, that sort of thing, checking checks, et cetera.
Is I can't find that on my iPad. Do you mind if I look?
No,
at
no,
that?
no, no.
Is it about, it looks like it's about maybe 70% easement, 30% fee simple, or is it half and half? Is that how things mainly go, like, as far as what we're helping to fund?
Yes, but we've made that's one of our ordinance changes, is that when we had a fee simple project, there was no requirement that there'd be a conservation easement with it. So all we would have that referenced, well, we had two things that would reference our role. One was a grant agreement, and another was just a little bit of deed language
Okay.
that said they had to comply with the terms of our ordinance. And we felt like that didn't give us enough assurance that it would be conserved in a kind of a rigorous manner.
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided we'll still do fee simple, but the fee simple has to go with the conservation easement. And the interesting thing about that is that the three main eligible recipients that have come to us, the Coney Soil and Water Conservation District, Upstate Forever, and the Natural Land Trust. Upstate Forever and the Conservation District, Soil and Water Conservation District, they do conservation easements. The Natural Land Trust does fee simple purchases, kind of like they, plan to do with the Whetstone Creek Preserve, to transfer to a public entity. And they generally don't put conservation easements on property, and because they run into the problem that they ran into with Whetstone Creek Preserve, the public entity may not want it with that conservation easement. So that might really affect them coming to us.
Okay.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, thank
I think from our perspective, it's a good thing.
Right in here, I can't even
We
find
just have
it.
more
Thank you.
assurance that the conservation will be, I don't know, to our liking, or,
Yeah.
you know, there's just gonna be more control over it.
I understand it's gonna be more control, but it's also going to limit opportunities
That's a good point.
to,
Yep.
you know, do something constructive, I'll call it.
Right,
Even if it might not be exactly what we would prefer,
right.
I mean, it's probably worth a discussion at some point in time as to whether or not it's good enough
Right.
to just have a fee simple with the intent that it goes to a, you know, a Forest Service or somebody, you know, somebody who has, maybe we could even define what they have to have in terms of conservation intent,
Protection.
protections and, you know, and maybe history. I mean, Forest Service doesn't have a big history of doing anything else,
That's right.
you know?
Yeah.
So why are we unduly limiting ourselves?
That's a good
It's
point.
just a question. You know, again, I'm new to this, so I'm just asking questions here, guys. So, you know, is it something that we really ought to be considering or not?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess, you know, I mean, our discussion it was the flip side of that.
Right.
You know, just that led us to propose that change to the ordinance, which was passed, that, I guess the idea is that we felt better about the effect that a conservation easement would have long-term than just, you know, kind of minimal, and we're not a regulatory entity, and so, you know, and I think David Root agrees that the language that we had, even though they had to comply with our ordinance, there's no regulatory aspect to our ordinance.
Right.
That, you know, you could argue that they have to comply with, in a
We're
sense.
gonna talk about that later,
Yeah, okay.
I think.
And so that's kind of where we are with it.
Okay.
And so, Scotty, I think you're on the grants. There's no
There's no
changes as far as
changes.
you know?
No,
Okay.
no
All right.
changes.
All right. Okay, next on the agenda is discussion items on two of our policies, and then some, a little bit of report from myself. So you've probably seen, if you could scroll back to the beginning of that policy number 3, Jennifer.
Do you want the clean or do you want the red line?
Let's show the underline, if you'll show us a little bit more of the text, yeah, and a little bit more. Okay, that's good. So, I guess in 2021, well, okay, March 2nd, I guess, is when we created this policy. Our idea was to create a policy about grant procedures that would help us and applicants go through their process of submitting an application, that it would kind of line out the actual process for it. Because reading the ordinance, you know, you got to pick here, pick there, move around in the ordinance to figure out exactly what you need to do. So things have changed since then. One, that change to the ordinance requiring conservation easements on every property. David Root scrutinized the policy a little bit more and wanted it to be much simpler, and also felt uneasy about any places where we said in our policies that you must or shall or will do certain things. And so I guess what I should actually do is, so we can discuss this, is call for a motion to, and I'll make it, I move to approve these changes to policy number 3. And if we can get a second, then we can go into a full discussion of it.
I'll second that motion, but I had some questions about it.
Okay, and we'll do that as part of the discussion. Okay, so now Emily, our former chair, she really met with David and went through the policy And she's the one that did the strike-throughs and the underlines on it. In my opinion, it's a bit unwieldy in the sense of what we would need to do. A lot of the strike-throughs are, let's take out anything that's redundant from the ordinance. There's some substantive, like conservation value, but what I think actually might work best for us, and I talked to David Root about this yesterday, is if, and I think it would be helpful to our new members, and we're almost all new members at this point, is if we just backed up and said, let's start afresh with the concept of, our intent is to try to make it simpler for eligible recipients to go to a policy that tells them how to submit an application, and simpler for us in knowing the same thing. And so I think what I would actually think would be a good idea, if we're interested in doing it, and we would do it on a motion, is to form a committee, and our committee would need to be no more than 3 board members, to come, use what Emily's done, use the original policy, use the changes she's made, and go further than she went, or than this document, strike through and underline is, and bring that back to us, rescind the policy, and then adopt a new policy. But, so that's a suggestion, and we would do that on a motion to send it to committee, if we wanted to do that.
Can I ask a
Yeah, go ahead.
question that might be related? How much are we influenced in this by our partners? Do our partners have certain restrictions that they require? Or is it a separate, if we're all working together?
So when we made the policy before, we submitted drafts to them to get their input from it.
The partners we're working with?
Well, the eligible recipients, yeah.
Okay, but not like, I just didn't know if the people that were doing the easements, do they have certain restrictions that may go with or against what we're trying to do?
That's a good question. I don't, that's why we kind of asked them for their input.
Okay.
To see what they, if they did have anything there. And, we wanted to make sure that they understood, and if they could help us clarify what we were doing in there. But I don't know whether they're gonna be based on their constraints.
Exactly,
or
right,
whatever.
that makes sense.
Right.
And I think your critiques of what we have in place at the moment is that it's just kind of unwieldy. So you want to make it more streamlined so it's easier to read for an applicant? Is that the?
Yeah, and part of it too is that we could adopt this, but it's, I think today, if we were gonna do that, it still needs changes that we would go through line by line and do today. Go into David Root's concern about, there being must, will, and shall in there. And I think that's just a really tedious process for us to do, that's kind of ripe for making mistakes and missing something. And this is our shot to, we don't want to approve it and then come back and do it again. That it would be easier for us, I think, if we just made a clean policy, and that would be what I would kind of propose, of doing is just, just revisiting it with the idea of what we want to do and just try to make something that works better.
I'll make that motion to send this to a committee.
Okay, all right. And I've actually been reading up on our parliamentary procedures. That's what's called a privileged motion, and it doesn't require a second.
Oh.
And we can discuss it, and then it passes on a majority vote. So any thoughts about that? So this hadn't approved that we're gonna create a committee, but let's discuss the prospects of doing that.
Did Emily use a committee, or was this just she just sat down?
I actually I was the chair at the time, she was vice chair, and I was gone for a lot of that time, and she acted as chair, as vice chair, and then she became chair. I really don't know, because I wasn't here. I mean, do you know Scotty?
I believe she did it on her own.
Okay.
Remember her?
Yeah, I don't remember her talking about having a committee, doing that. I mean, she did an amazing amount of work.
Well, I think she did a great job. I love to see red, because I think it means you're taking out
Right.
stuff.
I mean,
that's
she
making
reduced it
necessary-
from 7 pages to, I think, 4.
Yeah, that's,
Which is, that's, half of our intent was doing that, making it simpler. And I actually think, I mean, she and I met and went through it yesterday, we went through it yesterday morning, and there's still some substantive language in there that is in the ordinance that I think could be removed as well. And so that's when I kind of started thinking, that's just, that kind of thing works better in doing it informally in a committee and figuring it out rather than trying to do it here, But yeah, she did a tremendous amount of work, you're right. Any other thoughts about that prospect of giving it another shot?
I think there's still room for improvement here, so I think it's probably a good idea.
Okay, all right.
How do we go about establishing who's going to be on the committee?
Well, by the rules of the parliamentary procedure, I get to appoint the committee.
Okay.
And so I'm in a little bit of quandary myself about that. Because I feel like I should be on the committee, but I also feel like the more new folks on there, the better. I mean, so I would almost think it would be myself and 2 other new folks, but I almost feel like, well, it should just be 3 new folks doing it, but that's probably not a good way to go
It's
about it.
probably not a good idea.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you could, the whole committee couldn't come to me to talk about it, but 1 or 2 could come to me to talk about it, so it wouldn't be a quorum type thing. That's the only way that would work, I would think. But I agree, I think it would be better if I'm on the committee. Anybody have any interest in being on the committee?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd work on it too.
I think both of y'all would be great.
Oh, that's great, okay. So, given that, let's vote on forming a committee that's going to be people by myself, Gordon, and Taylor. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Okay, very good. I'm gonna propose, so I'm gonna move that we adopt policy 5. Can you scroll up to that one, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Or down to that one?
Second.
Okay. And, this one's a little, and I'm gonna propose that we adopt this policy. Can we get a second on that to open discussion?
I'll second.
Okay, very good. All right, so this policy, if you could scroll just a little bit more down. Okay, so the main thing here is number 3, okay? The concept is if we've given a grant, they're gonna transfer it, the notice that we're gonna get of that transfer, so we can do our due diligence to review that new holder of the property. And so we've said at least 6 months prior to the anticipated closing date. From being a real estate attorney in the past, 6 months is a long time out to in my opinion, to require that, but I don't know, any other thoughts about that? I mean, our point is that, let's say if somebody was gonna transfer to the Chattooga Conservancy, holding the conservation easement or the property or whatever, and it's an eligible recipient we've not dealt with before, so we hadn't looked at them, they hadn't given us information. How much time do we need to do our review of an entity that we don't know?
What constitutes notice here? Is it written notice, or is it, I mean, because my understanding on this Whetstone Creek Preserve, when we did the original grant, everybody knew at the time, their intention was to go to the Forest Service.
That's right.
Was that notice at that time? That we, that we were gonna,
That's a good
it
point.
was gonna happen? And that was where it was gonna go? Do they have to give us some kind of a written document, or, I'm just asking,
No,
again.
number 2 says they have to submit it in writing to Jennifer, essentially. And so number 3 is just the time period on that.
So you're saying 6 months is too long, that that things can happen a lot quicker than 6 months?
They may wanna happen quicker than 6 months.
Yeah, and they may not know 6 months.
Right, I understand now.
That's the only thing that I have any issue with.
I mean, could you not say something like as soon as possible, once they have decided they're gonna do something like this? And I guess it's not a hard requirement, it's just encouraged,
Right.
so.
That's right.
6 months prior to the closing date.
Yeah, encourages is not real strong language, but that kind of goes towards the idea that this is a policy, not an ordinance, so this is not something that council does, it's something that we do, that we've been, instructed to not be mandatory in what we, as much as possible.
And was that the rationale for getting rid of the shalls and musts, is?
That's correct.
We're not a regulatory agency?
I guess so, yeah,
Because that was the question I had.
yeah. I mean, we do have a must in number 2. We could do the same thing with this that we just did with number 3, take this also and that's probably a good idea. Once David, the county attorney, started looking at, I guess, policy 3, it really kind of raised his eyebrows about how detailed it was, and everything it said, and, so I don't think it would be unwise to, now that he has a little bit more of an idea of what we've done in the past and what we might do in the future, to have him scrutinize this as well. So, we could just, we could do the same thing, wrap this into, the same kind of idea that we just did on policy number 3, just, take it to him. And I'll also say too, on that policy 3, there are, related documents to that grant procedure that we would want him to review as well. So I think ultimately, we've got a big package of things that we would like to take to David to make sure he's squared up and he'll give enough attention to it to make sure that whatever we do fits his, his concept of what we should and shouldn't be doing. So with that, we can entertain a motion to send it to the same committee if we'd like to.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Okay, all right, any more discussion on that? More thoughts? Okay, all in favor? Aye? Okay, very good. The last thing, let me just look at my notes. The main question that I wanted to come back on was, there were 2 of them. One was whether our ordinance requires our eligible recipients to send us their monitoring reports so that we would have a file of all the monitoring reports, and it doesn't. I don't think that's a good idea, but it doesn't require that. So that's the answer to that question. I mean, I just thought it would be good to have that, but we don't require that. I mean, I guess we could ask our eligible recipients for their monitoring reports. The other was to investigate what other local government conservation banks do regarding monitoring. As far as I got on that was trying to figure out what other local governments have conservation banks. I didn't get the answer to that. As far as I got on that was talking to Upstate Forever to see if they had a list on those. So I don't have a really affirmative or positive report on that. So, any thoughts on any of that?
I think it would be wonderful to get monitoring reports. I mean, that's really the only way you can ensure that our values are being upheld, but it gets back to, is that gonna be perceived as regulatory?
Right. And, you know, the place that our issue would be, yeah, we need to change that in our ordinance to require that. And we did a major revision of our ordinance a couple of years ago. And, at present, we don't want to do any ordinance changes unless we've got, you know, some substantial, really important things that we want to do at this point.
And I don't believe, I mean, if it's a credible land trust, I don't think they're gonna have any issue giving us monitoring reports if we just ask for it.
Right.
It's the ones that refuse to turn them over I might be worried about.
That's correct. All right.
You know, that could impact their ability to get future funds from us.
That's a good point.
That's right.
You know,
We'll remember this next time.
I mean, and they understand that. You know, I mean, I wouldn't think it would be an issue that we would ever have to force somebody to give us
I agree.
monitoring reports, assuming they exist.
Right.
Okay, I would think that they'd want to be as cooperative with us as they would with any other source of potential funding.
That's right.
So personally, I wouldn't be that concerned about it, and I wouldn't think you'd need something in the statute that said you must do this. I would think it, you know, on a reasonable request, they'd be happy to give it to us.
And it's a good question for David too. I think David would be wary of us acting outside the purview of our ordinance, you know, asking for something that we don't have the authority to do in our ordinance. But that's a good question for him. And it also goes to your question earlier on, Gordon, about required conservation easements. Any holder of a conservation easement has to do an annual monitoring visit and a report. With the fee simple transfers, the monitoring is, you know, so there's no conservation easement that's being held by an eligible recipient. The monitoring is incumbent on the county. And our general concept is that's not gonna happen. You know, so
Yeah.
that's one good thing about having conservation easement is that, and somebody's has to look out to see what's going on. And that probably wouldn't be happening with the county. So I think that was one of our rationales for going for conservation easements as well.
So when Nature Land Trust buys a piece of property, sometimes they do put an easement on it.
No, they never put it, if they're working in partnership with like Upstate Forever, there may be an easement on it, but my understanding is the Natural Land Trust doesn't do easements
not.
at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when they transfer it to, say, DNR or the South Carolina State Park System, and we know the Forestry Service doesn't want to have an easement on it. Does DNR have an easement on it?
That's a
or-
good question.
And I say this because
I don't know.
the Clemson Experimental Forest has no easement on it.
Right.
And there's a lot of talk about, you know, that Clemson owns all that land. Yes, it's a public entity, Clemson, but they could sell, you know, so it really is a deeper issue of how protected is it?
That's right.
I mean, I'm
Jennifer,
just
could
asking
you
out of
scroll back to that
curiosity.
grants report?
Not as my spot, not, you know, that's just my curiosity.
And
but-
that's kind of our same concern.
Yes.
Is that kind of once it's gone down the road, our impact is really small.
Right.
And the controls for what happens on the land are gonna be purely within whatever entity hauls it. So I was looking to see if the Coney Town that went to DNR, the first one, it doesn't have a conservation easement. It was just a pure, fee simple transfer.
Well, but
And
But
there's-
if Upstate Forever's involved in it, wouldn't they have an easement on it? 'Cause why else, because Upstate Forever doesn't purchase land.
It's a really good point. And I wasn't here when they did that, and I
Yeah.
think that they may have just been the lead applicant on it, or
Okay.
just, or a lead negotiator in that process. But you're right, they usually do conservation easements, but this one didn't come with a conservation easement.
And so DNR is now the holder of that property.
That is correct. That's correct. And so you'll see the last one, the Crawford Mill Foothills Farmstead, that's the one where, it was a fee simple transfer with a conservation easement.
So who holds that easement? The Foothills Farmstead, or? Do you know?
That's a really good question. I'm not really sure, and that needs to be on there. It might, I'll just have to check on that.
Well, the heading would suggest that it's Foothills Farmstead, because it says it's the owner/easement holder.
Yeah, and that doesn't make sense to me, that the owner would also be the conservation easement holder. I don't think it would work like that, but I'll check. Yeah.
There are so many fingers involved. I think that's just what I have a hard time kind of figuring out. Like, do we ever work with the South Carolina Conservation Bank? I would think we would.
We don't work with them, but most of these projects, I mean, our funding's rarely above 10% of
Right.
whatever they're needing. And the majority of their funding typically is gonna come from the South Carolina Conservation Bank or the Natural Resources Conservation Service, particularly the ones that are being done with the Soil and Water Conservation District. So we work with them in the sense of we're both contributing
Okay.
money, but we
So
don't
they are-
work with them.
But they're partners, okay.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah. But we don't work with them in terms of anything substantive.
Right. And do they require easements on things that they fund?
It's a good question. I would think they do most of them. I
so, too.
do know the U.S. Forest Service is not one of their eligible recipients, which is, I'm not sure why that's true. And it could be because they won't accept a conservation easement or any restrictions on deeds, but I don't know. It's a good question. Any other thoughts, questions about anything? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, and that, it doesn't require a second as well, so any discussion on that? Anybody oppose that? All in favor? Aye. Very good. Thank you.